Hello, and here I am again on my single cylinder Royal Enfield, this time riding along the high street of a town called Higham Ferrers in Northamptonshire into a low winter's late afternoon sun. And I'm shortly going to be making a turn ahead using the road on the left. This road is called Tollbar. The post in front obscures the sign, but take it from me, it does say Tollbar. And just whilst I wait for a gap in the traffic, let me explain that the road was called Tollbar because it was the site of an old toll gate at the junction of the Higham Ferrers Turnpike with the Kimbolton Turnpike. The former was a major north-south route, later the A6, and the Kimbolton Turnpike was a major east-west route, later the A45. That red brick building on the right was the exact spot on which the old toll gate keeper's cottage once stood. The building there with the sloping roof. And this is how that same junction looked in 1910, some 25 years after the turnpike era, but little changed for all that. The thatched cottage on the right is where the toll keeper's cottage stood. You can still make out the old turnpike information boards on the wall, which would have set out the various tolls to be paid back in the turnpike era. The A6, before the motorway era, was the main London route to the northwest of England, and as a major east-west route, the A45 ran from England's major manufacturing centres in the Midlands all the way to the port of Felixstowe. At this junction and former Tollbar, these two roads met before going their separate ways after about half a mile. There's that same tollkeeper's cottage again on the right. To the left of it, and still standing today, is the birthplace of Higham Ferrers' most famous son. Born here in 1364, Henry Chicheley later became the Archbishop of Canterbury. So, having pulled out of the side road, let's progress down the high street. You'll see on either side the raised pavement. Step back in time and you'll see those same raised pavements in 1910 too, showing how the old turnpike trusts lowered the level of the road to lower and smooth the gradient over the hill in the coach and horses era, to reduce the strain on the horses pulling the coaches. And travellers down the high street, like me, have always passed through the market square. Well, since 1251 that is, when the town gained its market charter. The market cross, that's the structure on the right with the conical base, originates from this time. On the left, shortly, is the college for clergymen, founded by Archbishop Chicheley back in the late 1300s. At the roundabout ahead, well, that's the point where the two turnpikes went their separate ways. To the right, the Kimbolton Turnpike, later the A45, and straight ahead the Higham Ferrers Turnpike, which later became the A6. Now, of course, two major arterial roads sharing the same road through the market square was not sustainable. But it's quite a surprise to discover how long the arrangement was tolerated, well into an era when traffic density was increasing. Plans for a bypass were discussed many years ago, but only in 1993 did they come to have any substance, and even then it was a decade before the bypass was finally opened in 2003. The A6 now skirts the edge of the town, whilst the road I'm travelling on now through the town has been redesignated as the A5028. But for now I'm continuing down the old A6. My ride was interrupted by road closures, so I chose not to bore you with the diversion. However, I'm back on the A6, which is also the current A6 at this point, ready to meet with the object of my ride out, the Irthlingborough Viaduct over the River Nen, near the town of Irthlingborough. Built in 1936, this is a concrete viaduct which replaced a very narrow medieval bridge. It must have been quite something when it was opened back in the 30s. This viaduct was built because the lovely old bridge just downstream was unable to support the volume of traffic, simply because its foundations were unstable and it was just too narrow. I'll go right around the roundabout ahead to park up near the old bridge. So instead of going back over the concrete viaduct, I'll turn off to the left. And here I am, back on the original turnpike route. And where I'll be pulling in to park was in fact the site of another toll house on the old turnpike. Like the one we saw earlier, however, there is no longer any trace left of it. Today, the A6 crosses the River Nen, its meadows and backwaters, on a concrete viaduct. It must have been quite an important local event when it opened in 1936. With a mix of classical and Art Deco features, the great concrete structure must have made a huge impact when completed, especially when compared to this, its predecessor. The old bridge, built in medieval times to carry pedestrians and horse-drawn carts, has 10 ribbed arches. There is a stone bearing the arms of Peterborough Monastery, suggesting monastic involvement in its construction. Over the years, it has been repaired. One date stone is 1668. It was widened on the upstream side in 1754 by adding these red brick semicircular arches. A central plaque with an inscription relates to a restoration of 1829. A 1920s attempt to widen the bridge and its approaches was abandoned halfway through when it was found that the entire bridge was on the move seawards. The growth in motor traffic meant that the replacement of this old bridge was inevitable. And the concrete viaduct of 1936 was the result. Sadly, there is no information on the internet about its actual planning and construction. However, you don't need the technical details to be impressed by this noble river crossing from the first half of the 20th century. This is what the bridge was originally constructed for. Walking, the occasional pedestrian traveller, perhaps even more rarely a few pack horses, perhaps a horse and cart. This was the pace of long-distance travel in medieval times. What a contrast to the pace of traffic across the viaduct. And one last look before the low winter sun finally sets.